Welcome back to On Point with Ben and Am. Hello, Amardeep. How are you today?
I'm very well, Ben. Very well. Very well. Thank you, Ben. How are you?
I'm really good. And do you know what? I'm super excited because we've got data royalty on the podcast today. Data royalty. The one and only Mr. Nick Sawyer. Hey, Nick.
Hey, guys. Thank you. That's a very kind welcome.
Well, I don't say it lightly. The top, what is it? The top 100 data influencers, or what was the fancy title?
I think you pretty much got it. That's I was fortunate enough to get included in the Data IQ Top 100. Yeah,
that's amazing. Well done.
Yeah, fantastic. I could do a good intro. We know each other well, but I'm gonna think that you're going to do a better intro than I could. Would you like to give an overview to the listeners of who you are and where you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course. Delighted to. So my name's Nick Sawyer. I'm currently the Global Data Officer here at Docs, as you can probably see from behind me here. Just coming up to my first year anniversary, so that's quite exciting. Prior to this, I worked in industry. I worked at Sainsbury's for 6 years, went for a really interesting data journey there. And prior to Sainsbury's, I was working for EY as a consultant for 13 years. So I got to work variety of clients, industries, which was really interesting. But now really enjoying being in-house and growing a team.
Yeah, fantastic. And for anybody who's not watching on YouTube, Nick's not sitting in a shoe shop. You're sitting actually in one of the offices at Docs. Is that right?
Yeah, we're based in Camden. It's kind of our spiritual home here in London. Mm-hmm. And yeah, some of the shoes you can see behind me, part of our sort of archive of shoes. So I think over that shoulder, that's like a 1980s, it's more of a 1990s, etc. So for us, it's really important. It's part of the culture that we really embrace our history as well as looking to the future.
Yeah, I think that's something, I'm lucky enough to work with you. And yeah, I think it's certainly one of my favorite places to come to. It's a great location. I think as soon as you come into the office, you feel the kind of the history of Docs, and it's a really impressive culture that that we enjoy telling candidates about, to be honest with you. So yeah, thanks again for coming on. I think that there's so much that we could discuss, so we try not to kind of waffle on too long, but I think it's what I'd like to probably do is maybe kind of pick a few pieces and put them together for companies who are maybe looking at becoming more of a data-driven business, because obviously Docs is something that they've embraced pretty recently, and hence you coming on board. But I don't know, maybe start off with, I guess, what a CDO is. How would you define a CDO, and what would the CDO kind of bring to a business?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a great question. We could speak for an hour plus on just that subject, I think. And I think it varies company to company in terms of what a chief data officer is. People go by different names. We sit in different functions. I think we can have a really interesting debate around whether it should be a separate function that reports into the CEO. And I think we're seeing that. Yeah, I think there's a real growing trend in maybe some of the larger companies that could happen, and is happening rather, I should say. Yeah. Because people are realizing just how important data is to driving effective decisions. And for me, I've not answered your question yet, Ben, but I will get to it. For me, I think over the last sort of 24 months with COVID, you're seeing a real increase and a focus on data, which for me is really exciting. But I think is really promoting in a lot of companies the need for us to really understand our customers, our colleagues internally, so that actually we can be more effective in supporting customers in terms of whether it's products, how they want to get our products, how they want to access them. We just don't necessarily know that. So for me, really exciting time. Data is kind of being pushed up the agenda, and hence why some companies are now putting that CDO on the boards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think from my perspective over the last couple of years, I was always a technology recruiter, but I guess 80% of what I've done over the last 2 years has been data-related positions, and I think there's where companies have kind of started putting that focus towards data, because there's an enormous. It's not just it's not just a case of data engineering, right? It's data governance, it's setting strategies, and and ultimately a company like Docs, who are very close to being a FTSE 100 when they floated this time last year, steering that ship to suddenly become more data driven. How do you start to put a strategy in place for a business like Docs?
Yeah, look, again, a really good theoretical question. I was talking to some.
It almost sounds as though you prepped me on some of these questions. It almost sounds like it,
I would never lead the witness or whatever they expect. Yeah, look, I had a breakfast a few, sort of just before Christmas with some other CDOs, and we were discussing this. My personal view is you need a strategy to set that, what I would say is that North Star, that as a company and as a team you can drive towards, and then you need a vision to help drive towards that. Other people felt that was too structured, and actually that wasn't the right way. So conceptually interesting discussion. Practically, for me, I think it's really important you understand what is the business trying to deliver, what is the value that you're here to help support, and then you look to build your strategy around that. So for us here at Docs, our vision is, our North Star is to make every decision better with data. So we're always going to be chasing that, but it's a guiding light.
And I think what's really interesting as well is, I think the rise of the CDO, I call it, and the reason that's happening is people are not scared of data anymore, or the word data, or things around data, whereas maybe, don't know how far back we go, but maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, people, when anybody said data, they'd be frightened. What they don't realize is everyone in the business uses data, whether it's in the form of a report or making a decision based on something, or just getting figures, market research. It's all data, right? And I think that once a company and its employees are not scared of data anymore, they're suddenly very heavily interested in what the data strategy is, because ultimately it does support everyone in that business.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. I think as individuals, we're all using data more in our lives. We're more comfortable with it and the analysis that comes with that. And I'm really fortunate here at Docs, across all the functions, there's a real excitement and interest in what we can do with our data. Whether that's D&I, whether that's supply chain, or maybe some of the more traditional areas around customer products. So yeah, look, totally agree.
Good, excellent. So you've made data sexy at Docs.
We've definitely tried.
Well, you've succeeded.
You joke about that, and then looking at it a different way, like I, as someone who's, I guess technical recruiter, right? A couple of years ago, when I started looking at data, I'd probably find it quite boring. If someone said to me, "I've got a data analyst position," I'd be like, "That's a tough role to sell." Like, well, when I'm speaking to the candidates, maybe they're not as enthusiastic, and I'm, more kind of, it just wouldn't. But now, my point is that now I'm super excited by data, and I'm genuinely mean that. All of the customers that we work with in the data space. It's just changing the way we live our lives and how we buy, and everything is data related. And for me, companies that aren't on that kind of data journey have got to get on it really quickly. A couple of years ago, I remember seeing a stat. It was literally 2 years ago that 70% of companies didn't know what to do with the data that they had to turn it to making better business decisions. And then they'll be interacting with consultancies such as ours. So obviously, you have kind of initial discussions to kind of establish that, but it's such a big journey, isn't it? A company like Docs, I'm going to guess, has got different data on different systems in different departments, probably all over the world, Nick.
Yeah, completely. And hey, we're definitely not perfect. We've got a lot that we want to mature on, and I think that we can do more with. But hey, Ben, you're right. We are a global organisation, so we have the EMEA practice, which is based out of here in London, but we also have a large North American practice and then an Asian practice. So South Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, China being kind of our main markets. So we are fortunate to produce a lot of data. The challenge for me and for my team is then how do we harness that, and how do we prioritize what we're going to work on to support the business, drive better decisions. And that's something we can't do. That has to be driven by the business. Yeah. And that's, I think, really important.
And it's interesting as well, because you're a product company in terms of what you sell, and you've got all these fantastic products that are also being marketed. So the data is going to drive those marketing campaigns, and also bring in more data from the campaigns in order to make, like what you said, better decisions, whether it's marketing, whether it's how you the perception of the product in society, etc., etc. So it is really interesting. And I find when people say we're not a data company, most companies are data companies, they just haven't realized yet.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. I think, you know, I think we have to find a balance. I think a lot of people talk about that creepy line. So, you know, you might be really comfortable that I know your shoe size and I know that you like vegan shoes, so that I promote those to you when I speak to you.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's how far are you comfortable? You know, do you want me to know that you're walking down the street and about to get to our Carnaby store? You know, would that be too far in terms of, you know, that?
Yeah, that's really interesting, Nick. That's really, really interesting, that bit, because if somebody asked me, I hate shopping. Like, I really hate shopping. What I do
really?
is like, yeah, I hate it. I hate it. It's my like worst thing ever, shopping. But what I do like is those absolutely personalized emails that come through and say, hey, we've just received this in a size 5 shoe in the size 5.
Was that a hint there, Am?
I feel like you know my data. But like, no, I really like that. A lot of people don't like it. I love it. Like, if it can save me having to shop and someone's saying based on what you've been looking at, or you've put into your cart, or you've favorited on our website, we're just going to send you a lot of stuff that we think you like. I often do like it. It goes straight into my shopping bag and I don't have to set foot into a shop, which is great. So I actually like it. And I think especially when we hit the pandemic and everything went like properly online and stores unfortunately had to close, we had to rely on going online. And not just that, but what a lot of people like to do is try on, right? We can't do that in the store anymore. So when you send me a size 5 shoe in a narrow fit, I want it to fit and I want it to look great. So you need that data in order to make better decisions.
I'm taking mental notes here. Size 5, a narrow fit rather than maybe a wider one. Made in Britain by the sounds of it.
You got like any zebra style, like to match Amardeep's top as well. Like, yeah, matches. What you got?
Some interesting choices in here I could put your way.
Yeah, no, I really like that in terms of like going back to your key point, which was to make better decisions for docs. Like, I think it's really important, and if everybody adopts that, and I think that comes from your CDO background and your experience, like make better decisions. Everybody wants to make better decisions, smarter decisions, more effective decisions in business. So I think that's a great point. Sorry, Ben, I think it's
no. With I was going to pick up on the pandemic because Amardeep mentioned it there, and I guess I've got a little bit of an inside track, but Doc's had quite an interesting kind of journey through the pandemic, didn't you? When many Amardeep spoke about some stores closing down, you guys were opening stores, right?
Yeah, look, we've been really fortunate. I think we have an amazing brand and some really loyal customers that just love the innovation that we've been providing. So we've been fortunate to grow during the pandemic. Like you say, Ben, we've opened more stores, we've grown the markets that we're in, and at the same time we've seen a real shift in terms of actually our online presence. So we saw a growth in both sides, which is quite unique. You know, we've grown our office space here in London as well. So yeah, I think we're doing a few things right. I think we could definitely get better. And I think, you know, it's about, you know, as I said earlier, prioritizing what are the key drivers for the business. So, you know, Am and I obviously we were just talking about how we personalize things. There's a limit to where you want to go.
Yeah.
I think we could go further, but actually from a data perspective, we've had a real focus on our underlying data, which is probably the less sexy, for want of a better word, in terms of talked about areas, but actually is fundamental if you want to drive those better decisions.
Yeah,
you need to have that underlying data in place, governed, controlled, but with the right access and ultimately driving self-service for the business.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of retail, in the retail space in itself as well, you know, you're really open to fraud and stuff like that. So also having that data accessible at the right time, I think a lot of people misunderstand what real-time data is and whether they actually need real-time data. And for me, the key area for real-time data is the fraud team, to make sure, like, you know, bulk buying docs on a stolen credit card, for example, stuff like that, to resell. And I went through a bit of a journey with a client where we were looking at data and moving the data, and most of the people were saying to me, I need it real time, I need it instant. And I went through a journey of explaining what actually real time meant, because could you have it 15 minutes later? Oh yeah, that'd be fine. You can have it a couple of hours, but then it's not real time anymore. And you know what the perception of it is. And I think it's a good journey, because you start to, like you say, govern the data and make sure that people are accessing the data when they need to and if they need to. Because at the same time, like what you said, we still have to protect people. You don't want to push too much at me for me to feel like you know me better than I know me.
Yeah.
So, you know, even though ultimately that's, as a consumer, what we actually want, we want to be told what we want, ultimately, what I do. So
Exactly. You know,
it's a fine balance, isn't it? It's a fine balance.
It really is. And we've still got a cliche comment, journey even to go on to get that right. We're not there yet. But, you know, customer data specifically, you know, we have to be 100% clear in terms of how we're managing it, the access rights. You know, for us, that's a non-negotiable. I'm sure that is for every company, but you know, that's
and it's interesting that you said that. Sorry, Ben. It's interesting that you said that, Nick, just because recently the amount of data breaches, the amount of tools that are available now to even tell you you've had a data breach. So I use like a password manager, like a lot of people, and my password manager will just tell me if a site or a company has been breached, to very quickly go. I'll get a notification of instantly to go and like change my credentials. So the tools that are now available to let us know that companies could be breaching the data, it's made us all aware of data. So that's interesting as well.
Look, I think that's right. It's just another great example of how we're all starting to use data and actually helping it to make decisions. Because if the bank we have loses our data or is included, you're like, oh, actually, do I now feel comfortable them having all this information about me?
Yeah.
Or whatever. In our case, obviously, we want our customers to feel safe, that they can shop here, that they can leave their credit card details, and that, you know, that is 100% secure. I can hear Theo, who's our kind of head of information security, nodding and agreeing stringently with my desire for security. But, you know, jokes aside, it really is important.
Ben, I've got a question. Sorry.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say I've got a question, but please feel free to butt in.
What, a question for me, you say?
No,
you say go
questions for Ben.
Listen, go for it, Amardeep. I've got questions, but you're
so in terms of like, I had a really interesting conversation with someone earlier on today about the role data engineer versus software engineer, and he was like, I'm a software engineer who happens to be able to do data engineering. And it was a really interesting conversation, because some people like to get called a data engineer. Yeah. So to come back to like the data division at Docs, how closely with technology, I'm going to separate it for a second. So I'm going to separate it in this context. Okay. So you've got data at Docs and you've got technology at Docs. So how hand in hand do you go? Does technology, do you work on how you'll move forward in terms of architecture together, or do you drive it a little bit from a data point of view, or do they drive it from a technology point of view?
Cool. Look, that wasn't one question. I think you definitely.
No, it was options. It was a question with options.
So yeah, look. So I sit within technology. So I report to Ron, who's our chief technology officer. So I work really closely, and I've been at other organizations where we've sat in the business or we sat in finance. And look, it's going to be different for different organizations and their maturity. For me, I think now is a great time for me to be sitting alongside my technology colleagues, because we're really focusing on the data. And you know, the original part of the question was around data engineering versus software engineering. And actually, we need to work really closely together. And we're trying to drive a more agile-driven approach and a more product-driven approach here at Docs, which is a big change for us as a technology team, but also for the business. So if we're focusing more on products in terms of from a technology product or data product perspective, it's really important that we can source the data through the rest of the technology, you know, ingest it, have the security in place that supports it, as well as then obviously our role in terms of governing it, structuring it, presenting it to the business. So I'd like to say we're kind of hand in glove as a team.
Yeah.
And clearly from an architectural perspective, you know, I'm again really fortunate. Gary, who's our enterprise architect, really gets the business outcomes, which is clearly what, you know, I'm really focused on as well. So we work together. If he's looking at our order management system, actually, how can that help us drive better decisions? How can that help us drive, you know, a better customer experience? So for me, it's really important that the two work together. And, you know, like I say, we're really focusing on the underlying data at the moment. So I think really important that relationship exists.
Yeah, good. And then I was going to say that I worked with a client recently. Well, we're still working with them, but a phrase that was thrown about, and it was talking about just taking product, taking technology and just forcing it together and making sure that when we're writing user stories and we're creating delivery roadmaps and epic roadmaps, etc., we're thinking about the whole picture. So, you know, you've got your standard sort of functionals and non-functionals, etc., etc. But they used a phrase and it was called the unhappy path. And I was really I didn't really understand it to begin with. It was being thrown around in meetings. I just went and spoke to somebody. I was like, what does that actually mean? And the unhappy path is all the things that happen in the background that contribute or come off is a ricochet off the user story of that epic. So I took it to another client and I was like, hey, look, because they were struggling actually with why is our technology not being delivered somewhat on time? And it was down to just poorly written user stories and poorly written, just poor product ownership. Yeah. And I introduced the unhappy path at this other client and they were like, oh, it makes sense. So if my user story is just, I don't know, make sure the user can see this button, I need to see that button because that team needs to run a report off the button to make sure we know how many clicks it's had. I'm like, unhappy path. So the happy path is just the most basic one and the unhappy path becomes very data led. And I realized that after using it. So it was really interesting how, and they managed to really close that gap between product, technology, and any other division that it touches just by calling it the unhappy path. And you would see it written out just like acceptance criteria in this user story, unhappy paths. So it's really interesting how they close that data gap, and I really enjoyed doing that actually with them.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah,
Ben, I feel like we've forgotten you here.
You did, sorry.
No, listen. I mean, to be honest with you, the kind of questions I wanted to put it back to is a little bit more about, I guess, the team and the capabilities that you've got in your team. And you know, I know firsthand how the team has grown, and I guess it's interesting because different companies are at different stages of their data journey. But I guess when you're talking about kind of agile and how you're working with technology, it was all going to relate to that. So I'm actually quite happy that AMS did that. In terms of like the capability of your team and the makeup of your team and when you're, you know, initially putting together, I guess your blueprint and your roadmap for your division, what's the kind of key factors that you look for?
So I think there are some must-haves, for want of a better expression, and then certain roles and quantity, for want of a better expression. That's poor language when we're talking about individuals, but you know, the kind of the ability for you to deliver, you need a certain engine room. And then I think you need to tinker, as it were, with some of maybe the more specialist skills around the edge. So at Docs, what we've done is we tweaked the operating model that we had here in place. So from a skill perspective, we have now 5 core capabilities, or at least 5 capabilities that we look at. This is going to be a good test. I'm really worried that I might forget one of my team. No pressure. So we have reporting, which is kind of setting the standards, automating reporting for the business. We have analytics, which is driving the insight and the value to the business. We have data governance, which I touched on earlier. Really important that we have the right quality and the right governance and ownership within the business. We have architecture. Again, to Am's point earlier, how do we work with the rest of technology and ensure that consistency, both at an enterprise but also at solution and a domain level. And we have engineering, obviously, which the biggest part of my team. Nearly forgot it. Don't worry.
I was ready to come in with engineering. I was like, it's got to be engineering. I was like, yeah.
So those are the 5 that we have within the team here, and in line with the real focus on sorting our underlying data, structuring it, and moving to a modern data ecosystem. The majority of my team are data engineers, so obviously varying experience, to really help with that. And then obviously the other roles create that skill set that we need here.
And I guess and everyone, each head of, I guess, knows what's going on in each team. You've got a leadership team that's, I guess, helping you drive the whole division forward. So it's because sometimes some of the other companies you work with that are maybe, I guess, have larger teams, because obviously it's early on in your journey, I guess, and your team, I'm sure, is going to be growing. Sometimes you feel like it's a little bit kind of like they're a bit separated, but you've got a leadership team, so everyone's quite understands what's driving from the analytics to obviously with the bringing in the governance as well.
Yeah, completely. For me, look, let's be honest, they're the brains. I'm not going to claim I'm the beauty, but I'm kind of I'm here to set that vision, and the team are here to help us deliver it. So it's really, really important that we work closely to each other. We have full visibility of what each of the various different teams are delivering, and our success is, to be honest, frankly, down to them, not me. So for me, the team is hugely important. We try and operate actually as flatter organisation as possible. And for me, that kind of feels just right and natural. But it's been interesting. We have recruited a number of people recently, and for some people, they're not used to that. They almost, Nick's talking to me. Why is he asking me questions? Whereas I'm just really interested in what you're doing. So we try and drive that. We do social events together. We've been doing virtual social events where possible due to COVID, when we couldn't come into the office. So that leadership is key. It sets the tone for each of the areas, and they drive delivery.
Well, it's exciting, and obviously the team's growing. So I guess what's the biggest challenges that you're going to face this year? Maybe what are you going to come up against?
Yeah, well, hey, you know the market probably better than I do, Ben. So my interpretation would be it's a hugely competitive market out there. People are moving much more freely. I would say because people have been working from home, it's a lot easier to have interviews, because I can just stop this call and go straight into an interview. I don't have to go to another office or have a suit on, and everyone's like,
that would stand out in Doc's
that would definitely stand out.
Yeah, they'll definitely know something's up.
Look, that I sort of jest, that's elements of it. I think, to go back to the earlier discussion, like, data is hugely growing as a competency and a capability. So there's an appetite within the market, right, to get people. So the challenge, I think, is recruiting great people that fit the team here. And I think every team and every culture and every company is different. So it's about finding what's right for the candidate and for us. But then it's around, making sure that person enjoys their time here, that they grow, that they develop, and actually they're not looking at the website to see what their next role is. They're like actually really interested in how we can drive new products or work with our customers or drive our D&I agenda, whatever that might be. So for me, it's about keeping that team ethos, and as we grow and do become bigger, that we kind of keep that feeling that we've got, because we have been quite small, which has been quite special, even as we get bigger.
Yeah, I can say firsthand, your culture's absolutely fantastic, and I know you're a very social business as well, and we're actually even going to ping pong next week, which I'm looking at. So looking forward to. So
you're not allowed to try and win this time, though, Ben.
Well, I didn't. I came second last time, but if you remember,
Ben,
I let Rob win because I couldn't go to the Custer and come away with the win. So I'll go for second again next week, and I'll be happy. If I'm second again, you know that I've let it.
Ben's really competitive. That's why he can't. He's not going to let anyone.
I've got table tennis bats underneath. I've been practicing up against the wall, just get it going. No, I think just speaking freely, I think it's and again, knowing the team as I do, I think there's more data jobs out there than there are candidates. I think that's actually a well-known thing. And I think as it's interesting when Amardeep was talking about software engineers moving into data. I know exactly who Amardeep met today, and yes, he would say that was his job, but he worked in the biggest data team.
He does.
That Nick knows very well, an old company. He worked there for long enough and he actually went there as a software engineer. So I think it's about timing. I think within data, I think what you don't want is people who are moved, because there is positions that will pay money, and there is a lot and people get desperate and they'll pay more money because of the requirements, and that's not what I'd ever advise a company to move for. You want to be moving for the opportunity and the culture of the team, of course, but it's also the journey. And I think that's what's special with you guys. I think where you're at and where you want to go to, for me, is what's really, really interesting. It's such a fantastic brand, and it's just gone on an incredible journey over the last kind of 12 months or so. It's, it's exciting to see what's going to happen next, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think you're right. It's whenever a team grows, it's always about keeping the culture. But I can personally say, and diversity inclusion is something that Amardeep and I have started our business on, and we live and breathe it. And I think that as far as a company goes, it's probably the most inclusive company I've worked with, to be honest.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's great to hear, Ben. And it is really important to me personally, as well as to the company here. Like we generally want people. And I've been at other companies without naming names where they talk about being your true self. This is probably the first company I feel like you really can be who you want. And actually they encourage you to be more you. You don't want people to fit some sort of perceived work profile. It's about being yourself. And actually, if you are yourself, you're happy, you're going to enjoy your work, you're going to engage more effectively. So to be frank, it's really a win-win.
Yeah. No, fantastic. Listen, Nick, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I know you're very busy. Thank you so much for coming on. Really enjoyed the conversation. We're going to put this out, obviously, on our social posts on LinkedIn and YouTube and what have you. Are you okay for people to connect to you, to reach out and say hi? Are you open to that?
Great. I'd always love to talk to people. Data is growing, but it's still quite a small community. So it's amazing to hear what other people are doing, to steal their great ideas, and just connect and talk data, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're quite keen to, as the summer approaches, to have host a bit of an event. It's a great place to work, and hopefully, with the roof terrace and stuff, we can invite some of the data world that we have in our network between us, and look forward to it. So yeah, thank you once again, Nick. And
thanks, Nick.
Look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Sam.
Bye.
Lovely to speak to you guys.